The city of Rajagaha hummed under a sinking sun, its golden light turning dust into flame. Sariputta, once called the sharpest mind of Magadha, walked alone between stone walls and market cries, his thoughts louder than the crowd. He had read every scripture, debated every teacher, yet silence followed him like a shadow he could not escape. Can peace walk through pride? Can wisdom exist without love? The air grew still as he reached the edge of the marketplace and saw a monk unlike any other, motionless, radiant, his eyes neither open nor closed, as if seeing without looking. Something inside Sariputta cracked, a soundless break. He stepped closer, and the world seemed to breathe differently. Sariputta stopped a few paces away. The monk did not speak, did not even raise his eyes, yet a calm weight pressed into Sariputta's chest, like truth recognized too soon. He wanted to ask questions about the soul, about the path, about the meaning of all his studies, but no words came. The silence between them spoke more than any philosophy. In that breathless stillness, Sariputta realized he was standing before something not learned, but lived. A wind passed through the banyan branches, carrying dry leaves across the ground. Sariputta felt the movement like an echo of his own thoughts leaving him. The monk finally opened his eyes, not towards Sariputta, but into him. The moment lasted forever and ended instantly. Sariputta's heart whispered, "This silence, this is the answer." The Buddha rose and began to walk toward the forest path without a word. Sariputta followed, barefoot now, feeling each grain of dust beneath his feet. It was not obedience, it was recognition. The teacher had already said everything without speaking. As they moved toward the fading sun, the city's noise dissolved behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of footsteps and wind. A temple bell rang faintly in the distance, its tone trembling across the horizon. Sariputta turned back once the city now, only smoke and gold against twilight. The sound faded, leaving a silence that felt alive. For the first time, he did not think, did not seek. The question that had carried him so far had become the path itself. At dawn, the forest was covered in pale mist, and the world seemed newly made. Sariputta knelt before the Buddha, his forehead touching the cool earth. No words were exchanged. The sound of morning birds rose like prayer. He felt as if the years of questioning had burned away in one silent bow. When he looked up, the Buddha's eyes held no approval, no rejection, only clarity. In that gaze, Sariputta found what every argument had failed to give him: rest. Later that day, the Buddha handed Sariputta an alms bowl, plain, worn, and empty. "Go where the wind takes you," he said softly. Sariputta walked into the village streets, feeling every eye upon him. Once he had walked here as a philosopher in fine robes. Now, barefoot and silent, he begged for food. Each grain of rice felt like a teaching. With every humble step, he learned that to receive without pride is harder than to give with glory. At sunset, Sariputta met Moggallana, his dearest friend and fellow seeker. They had once studied the stars together, chasing truth through argument and wit. Now, they sat beneath the same sky, silent and smiling. "You found your path," said Moggallana. "No," Sariputta replied. "It found me." Their laughter broke the dusk light, free, no longer heavy with philosophy. The two would soon become known as the Buddha's chief disciples. But that night, they were simply two friends rediscovering stillness. Night deepened. Inside the meditation hall, a single candle flickered beside the Buddha. Sariputta sat among monks, their faces calm, the silence deep as a mountain lake. He closed his eyes and felt his breath rise and fall with the candle's flame. Thought dissolved, leaving only awareness. Yet somewhere within him, a tender thread remained: devotion, glowing like that same flame. Small but bright. He wondered if even love must, one day, be let go. At dawn beside a quiet pond, The Buddha spoke gently. When the water is still, it reflects the sky. When disturbed, it reflects itself. Sariputta watched the ripples fade until the surface mirrored the clouds. In that reflection, he saw himself not as a thinker, not as a disciple, but as awareness, watching awareness. He bowed deeply, not to the Buddha, but to the truth that was finally beginning to open within him. The morning sun poured through the forest canopy as the Buddha stood beneath the great banyan tree. Sariputta bowed before him, his heart both steady and trembling. Teach what you have seen, not what you have heard. Those words fell like stones into still water. Sariputta wanted to stay near his teacher, to keep learning, to keep seeing that light, but he understood. To cling even to truth is to remain unfree. With a single nod, he turned toward the long road ahead. As Sariputta journeyed alone through the plains, he found a sick man lying in dust by the roadside. The man's body shook with fever, and no one stopped. Sariputta knelt beside him, offering water from his own bowl. The man's eyes opened faintly, not in gratitude, but in fear. "Why help me?" he whispered. Sariputta smiled gently. "Because there is no me and no you, only this moment that asks to be kind." The wind fell silent as if listening. Days later, Sariputta entered a small village where people mocked his quiet ways. "You preach emptiness," they said, "yet you eat our food." He bowed to them without anger. "Yes," he said, "because the giver and the receiver are one." They laughed louder, but he simply smiled. That night he sat under the stars outside the village, hungry and unhurt. For the first time, he realized how vast compassion must be, not to change others, but to remain peaceful among them. One evening, while meditating by a shallow river, Sariputta saw his reflection trembling in the water. He thought of his teacher, his friend Moggallana, the people he had met. His reflection blurred and reformed with every breath. "This body, this face, this thought, all are like ripples," he whispered. The wind passed, the reflection vanished. For a long moment there was no one left to watch the river, and no river left to be watched. When morning came, Sariputta looked into his alms bowl. It was empty. Yet he felt no hunger, no disappointment. He smiled softly, whispering, "Even emptiness is full. As the sun rose, light filled the bowl like liquid go." In that moment, he understood it was never about receiving food, but realizing that nothing is missing. Everything he sought had always been here, waiting in stillness. The monsoon clouds rolled across the sky as Sariputta returned to the monastery. He expected the Buddha's familiar warmth, but the master now kept to himself, teaching others, passing Sariputta without a word. Confusion grew in him like rain over parched earth. Had he done something wrong? Each silence felt heavier than 1,000 teachings. Yet deep inside, another voice whispered, "This too is the lesson." Sariputta withdrew into a small cave on the edge of the forest. There, he sat through the long rain, the sound of water echoing like his own restless thoughts. Memories of the Buddha's smile haunted him. He tried to let them go, yet his heart clung tightly. Every drop of rain became a question. Can one love without attachment? Can one follow without dependence? The cave offered no answer, only the sound of his own breathing in the dark. One morning, Moggallana found him sitting alone, thin and pale. "Brother," he said gently, "you've gone too deep into silence." Sariputta smiled faintly. "Silence is all I have left." Moggallana sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Even silence must be shared," he said softly. They sat together as rainlight shimmered outside the cave, two friends, one calm as stone, the other bright as flame, both searching for the same stillness. That night, the storm came fierce, wild, unrelenting. Trees bent like bows and thunder split the sky. Sariputta sat unmoving through it all, rain seeping through cracks, lightning flashing across his face. Fear rose, then vanished, Anger rose, then vanished. Loneliness rose, then vanished. At last, only stillness remained. The storm outside became one with the storm within, and both dissolved into silence. When dawn came, the rain had stopped. Sariputta stepped outside, the forest gleaming with fresh light. Every leaf dripped gold. Every sound was new. He looked toward the monastery in the distance, the Buddha still silent, yet present everywhere. For the first time, Sariputta felt peace without nearness. He whispered, "The master never left." And for the first time, the silence answered with peace, not pain. The world was still when Sariputta reached the riverbank. Mist floated over the water like breath from a sleeping earth. He sat upon the cold stone, closing his eyes as the first pale light touched the horizon. Thoughts rose his teacher's face, his own pride, his years of searching, and faded like ripples on water. The river whispered without voice, "You cannot hold what you already are." The wind carried that silence deep into his chest. A single leaf loosened from a tree branch above and drifted down, spinning gently before resting on the water's surface. Sariputta watched it float away light, ungrasping, free. Suddenly he understood. Life falls without fear because it never owned the tree. In that instant, all effort vanished. There was no seeker, no sought, no path, only the movement of the leaf, the flow of the river, and the space between them. His breathing slowed until even the sound of it dissolved. For a timeless instant, Sariputta vanished into everything: sky, water, wind, silence. There was no Sariputta left to know enlightenment, only knowing itself, vast and boundless. The river flowed through him, the world breathed him, and the last thought that ever truly belonged to him was, "There is no one to awaken." When he opened his eyes, the world was brighter than before, not because the sun had risen, but because nothing was separate anymore. Tears welled up and fell silently into the river. They were not tears of joy, nor of sorrow, but of release. The mind that once clung to meaning had dissolved, yet the heart, still human, trembled before the vastness it had become. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the river in gold. Sariputta smiled softly, not at the sunrise, but at the scene itself. A bird lifted from the water's edge, its wings scattering light into air. He whispered, "There was never anyone to reach the other shore." The river flowed on, endless and complete, carrying his words away as if they had always belonged to it. Sariputta walked back through the same forest where he had once trembled before his teacher. But now, every leaf, every breeze seemed to bow in stillness. When he reached the grove, the monks gathered around him, whispering in awe. He spoke no words, his silence was enough. From afar, the Buddha watched him approach, his eyes gentle, knowing what no words could hold. When their eyes met, time fell away. The Buddha's face was calm as ever, yet his gaze reached into the boundless space that now lived within Sariputta. The disciple bowed deeply, forehead to earth. But the Buddha spoke softly, "There is nothing to bow to." Sariputta lifted his head, tears rising unbidden. "Then why do these eyes still weep?" he whispered. The Buddha smiled faintly. The silence between them answered, "More, Nushradi Ijal." Sariputta's tears fell freely, yet they carried no sorrow. He said, "I searched for you in every word, every silence, every path, and now I find you nowhere." The Buddha replied, "Because you have finally found everywhere." The monks watching wept silently, not knowing why. The world seemed to fade until only two figures remained, teacher and disciple, dissolving into the same light. The Buddha looked at his disciple with the stillness of the sky itself. "You have walked beyond me," he said softly. But there was never a me to pass. Sariputta's tears slowed, replaced by a calm smile. In that smile, the Buddha saw his own reflection like a flame seeing itself in another flame. The two sat side by side beneath the trees, silent, complete, one light shining through two forms. When evening fell, the Buddha rose and began to walk away. Sariputta remained seated, watching the saffron robe fade into the dimming forest. He did not feel loss, nor longing, only boundless stillness stretching beyond sky and breath. The truth had no shape, no teacher, no student. The river flowed. The wind whispered, and somewhere within everything the Buddha was still walking, yet never gone. The next morning, a soft golden light washed over the forest. Monks assembled quietly before Sariputta, who now sat where the Buddha had once sat. He did not speak as a teacher, nor act as a master. He simply sat, breathing with the trees. When the wind moved, he said, "Listen." The leaves rustled softly. "That is the sermon," he whispered. The monks bowed, not to him, but to the space between his words. One evening, Sariputta returned to the same hall where he once bowed before the Buddha. The seat where his teacher had sat was now empty, lit by a single lamp. He placed his palms together and smiled. "The lamp still burns," he said quietly, "because it was never lit." The hall filled with silence, not absence, but presence too vast to name. When a young monk asked, "Master, what is enlightenment?" Sariputta smiled. "When you drink water," he said, "you just drink. When you walk, you just walk. When you are silent, you just are." The monk frowned slightly, trying to understand. Sariputta laughed gently. "Stop trying," he said, "and you will." The monk looked down, and in that quiet moment, the lesson was complete. Years later, Sariputta returned alone to the same river where his awakening began. The water flowed unchanged, carrying light, wind, and memory together. He sat on the same stone, closed his eyes, and whispered, "All rivers return to the sea." The air grew still. His breath slowed. Even the sound of the river seemed to fade into something deeper, not silence, but eternity. As night fell, a soft breeze moved through the forest. The monks later said they heard a faint bell without a source, a sound between sound and silence. Sariputta's body sat still beneath the banyan tree, face serene, eyes half open as if listening to something eternal. Far away, the Buddha also sat in meditation, a smile passing briefly across his lips. The wind carried that smile through the trees, across the river, and into the quiet heart of the world.